Hello and welcome to The Stack. Today we feature a new magazine called Enthousiasmos, a magazine for all of us enthusiasts, featuring Luca Guadagnino in its first issue, plus American author Brett F Braley-Palko in his new novel and passion for stationery. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We start the show with a new exciting launch, Enthousiasmos, a beautiful title by Coppola and Johan Chiaramonte. The fantastically designed title is a magazine aimed at the curious enthusiasts out there, featuring one person every issue. First issue featured an in-depth interview with film director Luca Guadagnino, a favorite of mine. To tell us more about the title and even the importance of branding to a magazine, here is Roman and Johan.
Basically, Johan and I became friends. He's a magazine person. He makes a magazine called Rocky Rama, does other publications. And we met in that context, and he asked some very stimulating questions when he did an interview. And we hit it off and realized that we became friends and we shared some mutual interests and things that we loved. And so he posed the question. He said, well, if we were to do a magazine, what would it be? Are you interested? And I said, wow, that's a wonderful invitation. And so we started to brainstorm, and it became clear that our mutual curiosity about diverse things, subject matter that's unexpected, love of art and culture, and intriguing adventures in life were what we resonated on. And in our discussions, the word enthusiasmos seemed to hit it. And it's interesting because I remember looking up the word enthusiasm as a magazine, because that's the normal, word that we're all accustomed to. And there had been one in the 60s or 70s, like, shoot, someone took enthusiasm. But when I looked up the root word, and I think it's Greek, maybe it's Latin, I don't know, but enthusiasmos felt, that's our word, that's our title. And I think it does encapsulate the spirit of the magazine, which is basically, curious people using their enthusiasm in life and curiosity to discover and to find things that will further stimulate their imagination and enhance their life.
Before I ask Johan a bit more about the magazine, Roman, is that your first experience with a magazine, or you had a few others before?
I've always, it's funny because I am a curious person, and that's the root of this magazine, but I'm always trying this or trying that. When I made certain films in the past, I made a film called CQ years ago, and we made a kind of a magazine that came as part of a promotion. And my father has a magazine called Zoetrope All Story that I'm not personally involved with, but in my office, sometimes there's big stacks from the printing press of these magazines. And so it is something I've been around to a degree, but I've never led or co-led a magazine as we are now on this adventure.
And Johan, you mentioned, of course, you're responsible for Rocky Rama as well, which is amazing. The visuals of Rocky Rama, they're fantastic. And talking about the visuals for Enthusiasmos, I have to say, it's the same. They're very strong. So tell us a bit more. You, I think, like Roman, you actually did have a lot of experience in the magazine world, right?
Yeah, I have a little bit experience because I made Rocky Rama for 10 years now. I'm also the creative director of the magazine. All my magazine, I have the creative director. But first, as Roman said, everything starts with an interview I made with Roman when he came in Lyon with his dad for the Lumière Festival. And because I am a great fan of Roman's work, when I met Roman, we found we have that common culture about the 70s and the 80s. Roman can speak better than me about him, but we are a great fan of Charles White III or Milton Glaser, like that kind of graphist, or some guys like that from the 70s who have a very strong visual about what is a good magazine and a good cover. So for that magazine, we have worked with guys named Wary Meyers in USA, and we have the same way as we saw what the cover can be. And with Luca Guadagnino, who is our first guest, we want something who is very Italian, very Mediterranean, something very inspired the summer. So we take this way and we have that cover.
And, I think I read, Roman, on one of the posts for Enthusiasmos, the description of the design. Milton Glaser meets Charles White, which you just mentioned, a bit 70s Italy as well. I mean, so there is a very strong sense of aesthetics in there, right? Which is, again, amazing with Luca, which is also a man that cares about those things.
Yes, I mean, we're all harmonizing with something that we love mutually. I made a film called A Glimpse Inside the Mind of Charles Swann III that was set around a character who was a graphic designer in a kind of 70s parallel universe, because it was not exactly back in time. But I became friendly with Charles White III, and there's a man named David Willardson, a guy named Peter Palombi. There was a West Coast airbrush art scene that I fell in love with and has always resonated. And I think it goes back to my youth. As a kid during the 70s, you'd see these magazines and album covers, and it's such an impressive imagery. And magazines like Playboy in the US, and then in Europe there's a magazine called Créer and Zoom, and there's this kind of magazine imagery that was so striking and bold. So I think we all resonate. And so the graphic design is very important. It's our skin. It shows people what we're all about and what we love. But the content of the magazine really, of course, is where it's at. And it kind of is meant, I mean, people are just meant to take it however they wish. I don't want to define the experience you should have. But the way I see it is it's sort of like having a stimulating conversation with someone you have a wonderful rapport with, which was kind of the experience Johan and I had. And what also came to pass with the interview with Luca, who I have been acquainted with. And, we have seen each other over the years, and we like each other, we admire each other. But to really sit with him and chat and learn about his, how he was raised. He grew up in Ethiopia, and his various passions in life, and his love of food, and his love of film criticism. And so in a way, the experience of the magazine is like having a meal with someone that you just cannot wait to keep penetrating new subjects and discovering things and sharing things and hearing. So that was the experience with Luca. It was a real thrilling thing to be part of, because we just let it all flow. And because we had the agenda of creating our magazine, we weren't lazy, like, okay, well, I'll talk to you later. We're like, okay, let's talk more about this. Let's talk more about that. And where do you get the fish when you cook fish? Who's your fishmonger? What is your refrigerator filled with? We just really did a deep dive. And it was a great experience. So I'm hoping that thrill comes across in people who handle the magazine, flip through it and read it and enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. What a great choice as well for a character in the first issue. And Roman, I know you're in the US and Johan in France, in Lyon. But it's interesting, Johan, there's so many cool magazines in France. I don't know, because when I do the stack, I think this is an incredible magazine market. I mean, I know you're French, you might even disagree with me, but when I go to a kiosk in Paris, it's incredible, the number of cool independent titles. Is there something there? Or you might even disagree with me on that one?
That's funny you tell me that, because each time I go to London, I think the same thing.
Oh. Maybe I'm here, maybe I'm not noticing, it's so close to me.
I don't know, but for example, I saw the magazine like Little White Lies, cinema magazine about movies. I think it's incredible. It's a great inspiration for me for Rocky Rama. It's Little White Lies. So it comes from England. Of course, we have a lot of magazines in France, but I think in England and USA and Japanese too, there's a lot about the feeling, about the visual, about the graphism, about all things like that. We have we have a lot of magazines, but I think the English magazine and American magazine are better about the visual.
And how do you see that in the US, Roman, or, where you live? Do you still think, because in the US, most of my guests from the US, I mean, there's a strong subscription culture, but how do you feel are there still a lot of places where you can actually go and buy magazines? How do you see the scene in the US? I know the US is such a vast country, so perhaps where you live.
Well, Where I live in San Francisco, there are two magazine stores that I'm aware of that have a really nice, diverse collection. By and large, it's not very vibrant. San Francisco is a relatively smaller city to Paris or London or LA even. So it's very concentrated in few locations. Incidentally, in Los Angeles, I have an office on Cahuenga and Hollywood Boulevard, and there was for many, many years a very well-known newsstand. It was a 24-hour newsstand, had crazy diverse magazines for many, many years. But about 4 or 5 years, it went out of business, and I actually took the lease, so I have that space, and maybe one day we'll have a chance to bring it back. But that's sort of a symbol of what I've seen in my experience where magazines are less available. And, one of my things that I personally love, and I think Johan describes it too, is this notion of being a flaneur. It sounds like kind of a conceited word, but discovering things as you walk, and rather than going to a magazine shop like, oh, I'm going to buy a magazine, to stroll by and, hey, what's that? And it catches your eye. So I'm a little disappointed that in my life, at least in California, in the areas that I go around, there isn't that accidental experience of finding a magazine like a kiosk. You mentioned in Paris, I'll go to a cafe and there'll be a kiosk, you'll discover something. So that kind of random discovery, which is the spirit of the magazine, is not something that I'm seeing so much, but I hope it changes. And I'm an optimist, so maybe we'll get lucky and there'll be some other vibrancy in the magazine culture. But at the moment, it's a little bit in a lull in my experience.
And a question to both of you, whoever wants to answer, is about the merchandising, because that's something I feel that these days, if people, Monocle or Playboy or Enthousiasmos, they want to feel part of that world. So, and I think you guys started very strong. I mean, I wanted you to talk a little bit more about the merchandise. I know there's some candles, I've seen stickers. I mean, I would wear an Enthusiasmos t-shirt, by the way, if there is one. I think that's an important one, right? Important connection with the reader.
I agree, and I want Johan to have a chance to speak. I mean, when we got excited about this magazine, and it's all pure enthusiasm, as you driving it, it's just our pleasure and seeing things come to be. In fact, just prior to getting on this call, Johan said, "Oh, we got our flexi disc. We just got a shipment." So now there's a box of flexi discs with some audio material we did. And in the days to come, or weeks to come, or months to come, or years to come, maybe it'll be, "Oh, we got that T-shirt just came in," and maybe one day we'll say, "Oh yeah, our pop-up club opened in Tokyo for 2 weeks," or now we have our record label spinning on things. So there is an ambition, a gentle ambition, because it's not for the sake of ambition, but just for the sake of seeing things proliferate and people enjoying what we're doing, to think that this could be a bit of a brand in that sort of a cultural, it represents something to us or to me. Isn't it joyful to learn about things in the company of people that make stimulating work and have something to say and are fascinating people and curious people? So that's the basis of it. And imagine if there was a nightclub or a pop-up club or even just a party where you gather this kind of energy and you have that diversity in person. And likewise, whether it's a t-shirt or other product, that kind of becomes a symbol for this type of enthusiastic curiosity, much in the way that the Playboy brand in the years past represented something and has some corollary, because there was a fascination with talking with interesting people through the interviews that they did that were of the highest caliber, learning about stereo equipment, learning about culture, and of course, appreciating beauty and sexuality. So anyway, we're excited to see where this may go. And I love that you are the first person to offer you're interested in a t-shirt, because that's something we would love to do.
Amazing. I felt desire, like looking at the design, as soon as I saw it on social media. And Johan, I mean, as Roman was saying, it's kind of almost like an Enthusiasmos club, right? I mean, kind of inviting those people. And you're a man who knows about merchandising, because even Rocky Rama is quite collectible in that sense.
Yes, because Roman, as said it all, he doesn't need me, as you can see. But we have... I can call it some teenager's ambition, because I think Roman and me as stay some teenager in our mind, and we want to make some things stimulating, and we want to do something we can play with it, and some things funny. You understand? Some stickers, some pins, some T-shirts, and maybe one day, as Roman said, a club for 2 weeks in Tokyo. It's very fun. It's just for enjoy Enthusiasmos. I think the philosophy of the magazine and all the things we do, it's in the name Enthusiasmos. We want to do something who enthusiast.
Let me know about this club in Tokyo, okay? I might want to go there as well. And finally, Roman, just if people are interested, where can they buy? I mean, would there be somewhere online where people can actually go and buy it? And is the idea, how often will the magazine come out?
We have a distributor called KD Press, and I think it's PRESSSE, and it's available there. And we're just rolling out to, the magazine is hot off the press, as they say. And so we have a list of locations where it can be acquired physically, and we can share that with you. At the moment, it's just kind of in big crates of being, sent around. I believe we're quarterly at this moment in time. So we're striving to do 4 issues per year. We're on our 2nd issue, and I'll keep it private who the cover subjects are. I slipped because I said cover subjects because it's 2. That's just a little insight. But, the ambition is that as this gets rolling, and again, I love that Johan used the term teenager's enthusiasm, because I do feel like I'm in that kind of daydream state when you're in high school and, we could start a band or we can make a record label, or that type of energy, fanzine. So it definitely taps into that instinct and desire. But for the moment, it's 4 issues. But again, if we can catch some ignition and then people respond to it and we're able to do more, we would love that. It's meant to be diverse and proliferate, but also it's something that's done in a very intimate way.
Thank you very much, Roman Coppola and Johan Chiaramonte, talking about the first issue of Enthousiasmos, which is out now. For more information, go to their Instagram page on Enthusiasmos Club. Also this week I had the pleasure to speak with Brett F Braley-Palko, who I know from his great newsletter, from all things, from fashion to good stationery. Brett also just published his first novel, Arthur, a novel. Brett tells me more about the novel and, of course, his love for print.
Right now, I'm at 5 jobs. So my main job is in the luxury pen market. I am the director of marketing and head of partnerships for pen distributors in the United States, representing 5 pen brands. On top of that, I'm a novelist, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later. I also consult for some luxury brands, artisanal brands. I am a freelance writer. And last but not least, I am working on wholesale accounts for some of those brands I consult with in the hospitality space. So if you are a hotel looking for a pair of pajamas or perhaps, a luxury knife, I'm kind of the middleman to the artisans and small businesses that I work with.
And it's interesting that we're talking here, of course, here's the stack, we talk about magazines. I do think the world of stationery and people that love magazines, they combine somehow. I think if you like magazines, you kind of like stationery. Wouldn't you say so?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's a great point, is the fact that, with magazines or anything analog, let's say, including stationery or pens and paper, what you find is that people are looking for a way to slow down their pace of their daily life. There's a big difference between flipping through a magazine and scrolling on your phone while you're on the tube. So being able to have kind of the moment where you can just relax, I think really is the through line between those that love pens, perhaps those that love watches, or those that love magazines, of course.
I want to talk about your newsletter, which I follow, I subscribe. When did this idea came about? Because here at Monocle, we're also big believers in the newsletter. I think it's a very powerful medium to communicate. How is it going for you? Because it's not just, it's just not about your novel or about what you do, but you also interview people. There are a lot of interesting recommendations.
Yeah, for me, so I've had a newsletter in some format for going on 10 years.
10 years,
Prior
wow.
to my current role, I used to be a food blogger when that was popular. I had used that as a vehicle to kind of get my recipes out. I wasn't really in love with food blogging. I had it as a vehicle, of course, to write. For me, having a newsletter is a great way to build community without having to pander or beg for people. You know, instead of playing the hashtag game or the algorithm game, people can really come to me because I feel that I've built up enough of an audience or enough of a reputation to have that trust with my audience to say, okay, Brett's recommending these. Here's also, I'll often give a blurb as to why I like it. Here's why Brett likes it. And here's the price point that he's working within. So I think having that kind of trust with my audience builds a natural community that I can work within without having to, like I said, go out and try to post the best photo and hope people like it. Now I'm up to 10,000 followers and let's hope that gets me a brand deal. I really have stripped it back to what the internet used to be, where you could just write in one place, people will find you organically. And those people that stick around are the people that are more likely to like similar things that you do. You're not just going with who the affiliate link is or who the, hashtag link in bio might be.
I'm a strong believer as well in organic growth. I think, I think it's so important, especially when it comes to journalism. But Brett, let's talk about this beautiful novel I have in my hands, Arthur, a novel. I mean, before you tell me a little bit more about the plot, about the inspiration, I have to say the illustration is just beautiful. It's the main character here with his dogs. I mean, but tell us, who is actually the illustrator?
So the illustrator is a good friend of mine. His name's Miguel Carranza. He's out of, I believe, Guadalajara, 21 years old. He is truly a wunderkind in all senses of the word. I've been working with Miguel for going on 4 years, I believe now. I had previously written short stories that I would, again, just post on my newsletter just for fun, really. And Miguel has always really understood my vision. And having him be a part of the cover of my book, really, it was a no-brainer for me. He's really put my words to life, and it was important for me to have him on the cover of the book. So always a big shout out to Miguel for there.
And let's talk about the book. I remember a year ago, you were already telling me some of the story, and it's heavily influenced about British culture. I mean, you love British culture, right? So tell us about the connection as well, because the book is set in Britain indeed.
Yes, so I am a big Anglophile. Last year I did a tour of London for the first time, and part of it was for research for the book, but really, that's just what I put on my tax form. But for me, it was really important to center the book in London because British authors have always been a huge influence on my work. I think that the amount of wit and humor in British authors is unmatched. So much of my book is inspired by, let's say, early Iris Murdoch. You'll see very close ties to her first novel, Under the Net, as well as early Evelyn Waugh. So not his later work or even Brideshead Revisited, but his social satire novels played a huge part in my personal upbringing, but also how I wanted to dictate the voice of this novel.
And I have to say, the main character, his name is Arthur Cruz. I don't think he likes his surname indeed, but I love the name, actually. I think it's quite a cool name.
It's definitely one of those. I always find that British characters in fiction novels always have a little bit of humor to their names. So you'll find that Arthur, throughout the novel, he's a bit of a social climber. He wanted to change his name, but he won't because he has the nicest signature. And that's the only reason he hasn't changed his name yet, which very much kind of tells about how superficial he is and how he looks at life.
How is it, this is your first novel, right? I know you wrote short stories before, and you wrote articles for several magazines, including American GQ, but it's quite different, I guess, when you write a proper novel. I think that it's quite challenging. It takes time, no?
Yes. So I began this novel just like so many other English majors with a lot of time on their hand during the pandemic. So I started the novel. I was unemployed. I had worked previously in hospitality. And of course, during the pandemic, much of that industry had changed. So I kind of just started with a Google document and I was looking at my own life. Arthur has 4 dogs in a cramped flat in London, and I have 3 dogs in a cramped house in Pennsylvania. So I started to make these connections to a character that I could really understand, the stir craziness of living in such a small space with so many animals. So that was really the impetus for the novel. From there, it took almost exactly 4 years from when I first put fingers to keys to the publication. But there was a long stretch where I had not been looking for a publisher. I was really just writing for myself. Then I thought, well, maybe I will serialize it in my newsletter, or maybe, I just have this and say, at 30 years old, I wrote a novel and that's good enough for me. But the process of getting a publisher, that took almost a year. So if you take that chunk out of it, let's say maybe a 2-year process to actually write from start to finish.
And very cool. I actually didn't know. I was reading before chatting with you that there will be 2 more to come, right? That's part of your contract.
Yes. So I'm very lucky to work with a small publisher. It's called Thane & Prose. So it's a small team that I've got to know really closely. There aren't a lot of hierarchical levels within the organization. So working directly with the publisher, Neil, we have agreed to a series of short stories. So back to my roots, which was in short fiction. And then there'll also be a sequel to Arthur. And we're in talks for a 3rd novel spaced out, every 2 or 3 years. So well into the 2030s, you'll still be seeing my name.
And as I have you here, Brett, in your newsletter, there are a lot of magazine recommendations as well. I just want to pick up your brain. What have you been reading magazine-wise? Because is there a favorite, or what are your inspirations as well as a journalist?
So I'm not saying this just because I'm on Monocle Radio today, but I did get Confect in yesterday for their summer issue. So I have it dog-eared that I'll be taking my lunch break and reading through that. On top of that, I recently got into tennis. I'm on my 3rd lesson, so very bad, but I go all in when I enjoy something. So I'm reading Racket, which is the beautiful, almost art and fashion side of tennis, done in a beautiful way. So I picked up a couple issues of that over the weekend as well that will be coming in soon. On top of that, I'm thoroughly enjoying a magazine called It's a Passion Thing. I believe that you may have interviewed them previously. Yes. And I love, again, back to what I really enjoy are small makers with a lot of passion that really bring their business forward, and entrepreneurs with really a community mindset. So I got, I believe, 6 issues in the mail last month that I'm slowly but surely going through. And I feel like every page I'm putting a Post-it note or circling a line that can really help dictate my consulting business as well.
Thank you, Brett. Arthur is sold at major retailers globally, and for more information, go to his website, brettfbraley.com. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks to our editor, Jack Jewers. If you have any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. We're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. And meanwhile, please listen again on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.